On yesterday's show, we kind of put a period at the end of the sentence for all the teams that were hoping to be good that fell a little bit short and wrapped up what their seasons felt like. Today, we are hitting the other bucket of teams that is not going to be playing in the 2025-26 postseason, and that is the worst teams in the league. We're going to be hitting the top 8 teams based on current draft position today and just try to find something worth rooting your hopes and dreams in if you are a fan of this team. At least one silver lining for all 8 of these teams. We did this last year. I liked it as an exercise. I feel like it's worth doing again. Just a little parting gift for fans of teams that had to watch what they did all season.
I'm itching to get to the ones that are not quarterback related, because obviously some of these, like, the answer's a little bit easy. You might have a guy at those positions, but the 5 or 6 that are at other stuff, I'm actually really excited to dig into some of these.
There were 2 among these 8 teams where there's technically an answer, but it's not anything about the current team that I landed on. That's how bleak the situation is for both of those teams. And so there were 2 of the 6 where you really had to dig for an answer that you felt good about, which we can get to. Let's just kick it off. One of those teams is the team currently slated to pick first in the draft, the Las Vegas Raiders. The silver lining for this team, for me, it was pretty simply, you were in a position to potentially take a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. I think that's it. I'm not sure there's anything else about this year's Raiders that you can get overly excited about.
No, the only thing would be stuff that we said coming into the season already. Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty are sick, but you still don't have an offensive line in front of them. I'm still not sure they have any other receiver talent. Trey Tucker's fine, but also Trey Tucker would be cool if he was your speed 3 instead of being your leading receiver at this point with Jacoby Myers out of the building. So it really is just that you might get to reload and reset at quarterback. And if they don't fix the offensive line, does it really look that much better than it did with Geno Smith this year? Maybe not, but at least you're resetting the timeline and giving yourself a little bit of a road to fix the offensive line and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I may have drifted away from the Genty Bowers thing is that, like you said, we were saying that before the season. So it wasn't really a silver lining that crept up over the course of this year. It wasn't something we learned this year. If anything, the Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty seasons were about as disappointing as they could be because of how much of a dumpster fire the rest of the offense was.
Yeah, they kind of got you wasted a year of Brock Bowers, who got banged up at certain points this year, which I think was also a little bit of a problem if you're thinking about him long term. He'll probably be fine, but it's just annoying that he gets banged up this year. And then Genty had just the quietest rookie running back season for a top 10 guy in a really long time. It was very frustrating that this is where they landed with what I still think are 2 guys who are exceptionally talented. Brock Bowers, to me, if I need a tight end tomorrow, I probably do want Brock Bowers. If I want a running back, there's probably maybe only a half dozen guys I'm getting to before I want a guy like Ashton Genty. They're really talented. It's just when the offensive line was the 30th in the league, it's just there was no coming back from that.
Ashton Genty, 888 yards right now. I was trying to think of the last guy who was picked in the top 10 that had just that disappointing or forgettable of a season. Melvin Gordon wasn't very good as a rookie. That's a guy that you can pretty quickly go to as a first round pick. Melvin Gordon still had 1,100 yards his rookie year.
Right.
And Ashton Genty's currently sitting at 890.
My other was Todd Gurley, because that Rams team was terrible in 2016. But it still felt like you watched him and you were like, okay, I mean, this team is terrible. But this felt different, even though it wasn't really his fault.
That one game stretch, that one game that Ashton Genty had 2 weeks ago, Todd Gurley had a stretch of those games at the end of the 2015 season. Part of the reason that I remember that is because it's the last thing I wrote for Grantland was about how good Todd Gurley looked. And it was early in the year. So Todd Gurley, it was early in the season. So from weeks 2 through 5 of Todd Gurley's rookie year, he had 19 carries for 146, 30 carries for 159, 19 for 128 and 2 touchdowns, and then 20 for 133. So again, that one game Ashton Genty had last week, Todd Gurley had 4 of those in a row in the first 5 games of his rookie season. So it's been a while. Potentially since Trent Richardson, a guy drafted at running back this high. I guess Najee probably didn't have a very productive rookie year.
But
That
even
would be the
Najee
other one I
wasn't
would throw out
drafted
there.
that high. Like, he was a
Yeah.
first-round pick, but he wasn't drafted that high. And then even Richardson is different because, like, Richardson was just bad at individually. Like, Genty's not a bad player. Like, he's awesome, and this is still what the result was.
Najee had 1,200 rushing yards his rookie year. Again, it's the same as Melvin Gordon, where they averaged less than 4 yards a carry, but the volume was so extreme that it ends up looking okay. That's where we are with the Raiders 2025 season, is that we're trying to find things to be excited about, and even those things aren't particularly exciting. So the fact that they're in a position to take a quarterback at 1, I really think that's it. Like, you're in a spot where you can nuke most of this, and I assume the coaching staff will be different next year. I have to think that everyone in the building, ownership, does not want to do that, considering they just did it after having Antonio Pierce for a year. But we've talked a lot about this. I just don't know what sort of justification there is for bringing that staff back. Like, again, there's no silver lining to be had about the performance you saw from the people in charge of the football team this year.
Well, and because, the thing is, if this was a younger coaching staff and they had the year that they had, like, you could keep him around. But, like, the idea with bringing in a Pete Carroll was that he was going to get this team to, like, 7-8 wins pretty much immediately, and you could feel like you could fast-track competitiveness in 2026. And if that's not going to be the case, and you know there's no long-term with Pete Carroll, what's really the point of any of this?
I'm looking forward to a new coaching staff coming in and them deciding that Patrick Graham is probably the best defensive coordinator they'll be able to hire. And so he survives 3 different coaching staffs and stays the defensive coordinator.
That will have had to have been, like, the only time that's ever happened, if that happens.
I mean, he's an interesting free agent coaching-wise this offseason if they do bring in a new staff and they don't retain him. Because, again, that's just hard to do multiple times in a row. But I maintain the idea that I think Patrick Graham is a very good defensive coordinator.
Yes, because, again, we're getting a little off track here, but, like, to go back to yesterday's show, like, if Dallas is looking for a guy, like, and Patrick Graham's on the board, like, I would love that hire if that's where they arrive.
He's going to be, if he goes somewhere else, he's going to make a team and a fan base pretty happy, I think, because he's done a remarkable job with very limited talent multiple years in a row, considering what they've handed him. Let's keep moving down the draft board here. The New York Giants, currently slated to pick 2nd overall. What is your silver lining from the 2025 New York Giants season?
I'm going to be honest. I think this was the hardest one for me. But, like,
really?
It really was. And, like, I think Jackson Dart has shown enough that moving into next year, like, there are reasons to be excited about him. I just think when you calculate in some of the health stuff, like, that does get a little bit scary for me. And I know that other parts of the offense are talented as well. But, like, Malik Neighbors is awesome. Malik Neighbors is coming off of a very serious injury.
So, like, the health stuff beyond Dart is why it gives you a little bit of pause about the excitement overall.
It's a little bit of everything. Yeah,
because, like, that. It's so funny you say that. My first line of my notes is, after there's some talent here, the Dart Neighbors Thomas collection on offense is something to get excited about. All 3 of those guys have been hurt at points this year, and Andrew Thomas is hurt every single year.
And Cam Scatteraboo, like, people are excited about what he can be, and he, like, shredded his entire knee. And so it's like, if you just look at the names on paper, it would be easy to be like, okay, I can see how we can build around this. Maybe Dart takes a step in the pocket, and that's how we get this thing moving. But, like, if he's going to consistently be out of the lineup, Neighbors is maybe only 85% of what he can be. Who knows what Scatteraboo is going to be with how bad that injury was. And then Thomas is banged up all the time. It's like, you need a lot of dominoes to fall for this to really look as good as you want, I think.
That's a good point. With Neighbors, it's an ACL. Like, that stuff happens. It's not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen moving forward. I know he had been dealing with a lingering kind of foot-toe thing for a while, so maybe there are multiple things to worry about with him. With Dart, this feels like one of those where we're constantly talking about and constantly worried about a young quarterback taking too many hits, and then the young quarterback just kind of learns what he has to do in the NFL, and that ceases to be a problem. But with Andrew Thomas, it has been a multi-year thing. Like, I think that's worth considering and worth admitting when you're trying to project this team moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. At least, I guess my only skepticism with Dart is he just keeps insisting that this is how he wants to play.
I'm trying to think of a good example.
I don't know, man.
I'm trying to think of a good example. That we've done this before.
100%.
We do this with young quarterbacks all the time.
I mean, Josh Allen was like this. I don't know if he was as, like, adamant about, like, saying that he was going to play like that, but, like, Josh Allen took a lot of nasty hits, and he still kind of does, but he's better now.
And one of the reasons that I wouldn't be as worried about a Jackson Dart as I would be about, like, a Jaden Daniels is that Jackson Dart isn't built like Jaden Daniels, right? Like, these are concussions, which is a huge issue and is something to take very seriously. But his frame is not the thing that is betraying him in some of these moments like it is with Jaden Daniels. And I think that's why it just leaves me with a little bit less cause for concern moving forward when it comes to like his play style and how much that's going to impact him.
That is a good point. Like, it's something that Dart can just learn to be better at, whereas like Jaden Daniels, the reality is like he's just going to take some weird tackles in the pocket sometimes, small. And he just might he just might snap.
That's I mean, the other guy that is built like him at quarterback that has had injury issues, but it's mostly not been about him running, is like Lamar. But Lamar always avoided those hits early in his career. That was never an issue, even though he was a little bit slighter. I get where you're coming from. I still think that the silver lining is there is like a nucleus of talent on this team for whatever the next coaching staff is. If you're looking at it on offense, Jackson Dart has shown enough where, okay, let's see what this looks like in year 2 when you get Neighbors back, when you have a new coaching staff in there. Like, he has more than cleared the bar, in my opinion, even if I think that there's still some development that obviously needs to happen. Neighbors is an incredibly exciting player. You have a franchise left tackle. The offensive line is kind of in flux when you look at some of the guys hitting free agency. Van Roten's a free agent. Illuminor's a free agent. You assume Marcus Bowe can kind of maybe step into one of those guard spots. So you have him, you have Thomas. John Runyon is still there. They probably should be drafting a tackle pretty high at this point and seeking out another one as a long-term answer, but I still think there's enough there to be excited about for whoever the new coaching staff is. And then the defensive line, it wasn't what it was supposed to be this year, but with the right staff, that can still be a pretty scary group. I mean, you still are going to be walking into next season with Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter. We'll see what happens with Thibodeau. That's one where, like, I think you should maybe think about what you can get for him in the final year of that deal. Like, that's going to be an interesting conversation. But even those three, that's a good foundation on defense. And I think you have a good foundation on offense for a team picking second overall. And that's just not always the case. We just discussed it with the team that they beat on Sunday.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, again, if the dominoes fall right and these guys look healthy, like, I do think there is a lot to work with here. This just, like, I think compared to a couple of the other options here, just felt slightly less stable to me because of some of that stuff.
I think stable is a good word to use. For me, this is more about like wish casting and excitement.
That's fair.
And I think there's plenty
you can do that easily with
on the
talent,
Giants for you to be able to get there. The question now becomes, with this entire Giants offseason, who is going to be overseeing some of this stuff? Because it sounds right now, based on what Dan Duggan, our reporter, our Giants writer, one of our Giants writers at The Athletic has said, other Giants beat writers, it sounds like they prefer to keep Joe Schoen. And we've talked about this a lot. I think that's a tough sell based on how the last few years have gone with the Giants. There is some talent here. We just said that. But most of that talent was either here before he got here, or the way that they were acquired doesn't impress me. You drafted Malik Neighbors because he kind of fell into your lap in the top 5. You drafted Abdul Carter because you were sitting in the top 5. Even going out and getting a guy like Brian Burns, like, if I go out to the car dealership and I pay whatever the sticker price on the car says, I shouldn't be rewarded for now having the car. Like, just because it has value. And that's exactly what the Brian Burns trade is. Like, you paid a hefty amount to go get Brian Burns. So almost none of the moves, and even the Dart thing, he tried to distance himself from it in real time.
Yeah, he said that was the coach's thing, who the coach is now fired, and like they're probably going to keep that quarterback around. And so, yeah, we talked about before, I think when they fired Dable, like, I probably would have moved on from Schoen, basically for the reason that you're saying. Like, it feels to me a lot of like the Terry Fontenot thing. It's like, you can look at some of the talent, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, all these players, and it's like, well, yeah, I could have made that pick at 7th overall or whatever it was. Like, that doesn't really do a whole lot for me.
Here's what I would say if I was trying to paint an optimistic case for how this could work out. I've made the comparison between these two teams a bunch of different times this year. I think there are a lot of similarities between how the last few years of Giants football have gone and how the last 3 or 4 years before this year have gone for the Chicago Bears. And if you look at the Poles history and the Schoen history, there's not that much different about it. I mean, the player acquisition part is very similar. The
even at defensive end, like Montez Sweat,
it's the same trade. It's the exact same move. And so there are a lot of similarities. The Bears keep Poles. They bring in the right coach, and it changes everything. Whether you can find the right coach in this cycle that can give you like a Ben Johnson-esque transformation is a different sort of thing. We've seen this before where general managers are retained between coaching staffs, and those GMs get a little bit hotter with the second staff than they did with the first one, and they can kind of turn things around. I don't think there's a lot of reason to believe, based on the track record, that that is going to happen if Joe Schoen stays in charge of this front office. But we do have examples where keeping the GM was not a death sentence for the future of the franchise if you find the right coaching staff. I just think you're probably setting yourself up with an unnecessary barrier to success if you do it this way.
That's the thing. It just feels like you're having to jump through another hoop, which maybe it can work, but it just feels needlessly complicated.
Let's stay in New York with the New York Jets picking third overall as things currently stand. This is the hardest one for me.
Really? Why?
What's your answer?
Why? I think the offensive line. I think the offensive line has a good core.
Okay.
Yes, like I think the tackles are really, really good. I think the center, I think their center guard situation, like with Josh Myers and Joe Tippmann, I think has been settled. And so I know that John Simpson is going to be a free agent after this year, but like I do think the offensive line is really good. And I think their run game does kick ass. It's just the passing game was so bad. And the defense, especially down the stretch, was so bad that we just didn't really get to feel the value of it. But I really do think this offensive line can kick some ass. And like Membu's already good, but if he takes any sort of step, I think that that's going to go a long way. Like I think Olu Fashanu probably still has some more development in him. He's a young player. Tippmann obviously only moved to guard this year. He had mostly been a center for them, but I like a lot of what he's done at guard. Like they've got a lot of other pieces around this offensive line to fill in. And so it's maybe hard to get too excited, but I do think they have something really to stand on there.
Yeah, you're probably right. If you're trying to focus on one area of the roster, I think that's correct. Because, Membu, we saw the flashes early on. The offense and just the team in general has just been such a disaster down the stretch. But that's probably a foundational thing you can build on. My answer to this was not about the current team. It's just that you now have 1 million picks over the next 2 years. Like, if you're trying to rebuild this thing, which they clearly are, you have a ton of resources to do it. They have 4 picks slated to be in the top 50 this year. 4. After getting the Colts first round pick and the Cowboys second round pick. And then next year, they have 3 picks in the first round. And so we're looking at 8 picks probably in the top 50 in the next 2 years. And that on its own is exciting. It's a little bit less exciting considering we're like 3 or 4 years removed from the Jets doing this exact thing and it's solving nothing. But in a vacuum, it is good to have this amount of resources if you're an organization that feels completely rudderless.
Right. Just because they did it and failed doesn't mean that it's like bad process. Like I think this is a good idea for them. And so I am excited. I think too, especially because like when I'm thinking about like what do you want in a rebuild, I think oftentimes fixing the offensive line like is problem number one. Like teams are usually terrible because they can't block anybody. The Jets have the opposite problem where they can block just about anybody. It's literally every other part of the roster that is an issue, which I think especially when you're using some of those picks that are outside of like the top 10, top 15, it's a little bit easier to find some of those non-offensive line talent guys. Whereas like if you're really trying to hunt for the trenches, you kind of need to hit on those top 10 picks. But like if they've got, 6 of those picks from pick 20 to 50 in a lot of these drafts, if you're throwing all those at receivers and corners and some linebackers, like I think it could turn around fairly quickly.
I think that's a good point. It was a conversation we were having about this team coming into the year, is that was the kind of echo of what the Lions were early in their tenures, that they had the offensive line and things kind of flowed down from there. Unfortunately for the Jets, none of the other elements of this came together. And I think the key difference to this, and this is the other part of this conversation that I wanted to have, when we got to the end of year 1 of Dan Campbell, remember how excited everyone was despite the fact that they couldn't win a football game? Because they looked so much better than they should. They were playing a certain way. The vibes just emanating off of that year 1 Lions team were so good. Do you feel any of that with the 2025 Jets?
Absolutely not. And like part of that is I do think having the quarterback quality that they had, like being significantly lower, I think like does lower your floor. And when your floor,
but even before we got to the Brady Cook part of this, I wasn't
Justin
feeling
Fields
that
was
way.
always worse than like Jared Goff, even coming off of the Rams stuff. And so I think that there was that element of it. I'm more disappointed in the way that the defense played. Like I really did think that the defense was going to have more attitude to it. I thought that they were just going to be a little bit more put together, and it just seemed like none of what they wanted to do on that side of the ball ever really came together. Like the pass rush did not get up the way that they wanted to. They were benching their best player, Quincy Williams, at certain points in the season. They still don't have an interception this year, which if they don't in week 18 will be the first team that's ever done that, which is crazy when your coach is a cornerback, by the way. And so it's just like, I think the defense is a lot more concerning to me. The offense, I can pretty easily just look at like, yeah, you didn't have Garrett Wilson and your quarterbacks were bad. But the defense, I think, is a little bit more of a concern.
Are you like quietly more optimistic about the Jets than the general consensus is right now? You sound like you might be.
Maybe just because the offensive line and you have so many picks. Like, I think they're in a weird spot where it's like when you don't have the quarterback or head coach solved, like, I think there's a long way to go for you to bridge from like tepid excitement to like actually being a good team. But offensive line usually really is the toughest thing to fix, man. And when they have that on top of as many resources that they have, at least they are a team that I'm going to be very curious about how the next 2 seasons go. Like, I just think they're going to be a fun experiment.
2 big decisions, I think, that are looming for the Jets this offseason. Do you keep Aaron Glenn? My assumption is yes. Like, just based on the organizational history and not wanting to, again, to shake it up after 1 season, I don't think it's been so bad that you have to move on. And that's essentially, if you're firing a head coach after 1 year, the only time I'm ever in favor of that is when clearly there is just no coming back from this. I feel that way about the Pete Carroll situation now. I felt that way about Antonio Pierce last year. Probably felt that way about Gerard Mayo last year. I don't necessarily think the Jets are in that territory. I think it's one step up from there. And so I do think if you don't want to endure another coaching change, you could probably justify it, even though I think you're having to tell yourself a little bit of a story to get there. The other big question is, what do you do at quarterback? Because this is a class that does not have that many options at quarterback. And we just said it. You have 3 picks in the first round in 2027. And so for most teams, this idea of, well, we'll just get the quarterback next year when the quarterback class is better. Sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. It feels like if you're the Jets specifically, you know you're going to have the ammo to potentially move around. Do you bypass this group and potentially look for your guy next year, knowing that you don't need to find him this year? Like, this is going to be a multi-year rebuild when you have a lot of resources. Picking one to pick one isn't necessarily in your best interest because your timeline is so long. Similar to like what the Bears did that year where they bypassed the quarterbacks and waited for the following season.
Mm-hmm. I almost think that like that depends on what you think of Aaron Glenn, because I think if the idea is that we're going to draft a quarterback in 2027 and then strapping this offense and Aaron Glenn with another like stopgap type of quarterback or running it back or whatever, like that, at that point, you're kind of just like lame ducking the season. Like, to me, like that just doesn't feel like anybody's making any sort of progress here.
It's a really good point. And there's another team that I think it's a similar discussion about why you would or wouldn't seek out the quarterback this year specifically. The Browns are the team that I think we can have that discussion about as well. I think that's actually a good thought, where it's like, okay, if you aren't going to pick a quarterback this year, who is your bridge quarterback? And do you want to put this coaching staff in a place where they're just treading water next year? But I don't know. If you're Darren Moogie, should you be thinking about the coaching staff as part of this? Like what you just did by trading away those guys to get all those picks, I just think changes your mindset and your calculus and your timeline so much that thinking, well, we have to have an answer this year because of how bad the most recent season was. I think that potentially leads you to a decision that's a mistake that like you don't need to be making. It's a complicated question because I think there's so many kind of like environmental and like in the building considerations that you have to weigh when you're doing this. But I wouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is going to be like a 2 to 3 year process, and the quarterback should fall in line with that mindset as well.
I think the thing I would say is just, I think I would be disappointed if this happened. Like if Aaron Glenn got stuck with like another type of stop back. And I know that like he didn't necessarily do what he was supposed to do on his side of the ball, but I think his track record over what he had done over the last like 7-8 years as an assistant and then as a play caller, like I do think that giving him another year is worthwhile. And so I would just be, if they kind of, I don't know, like ran it back with like they just signed like a Jacoby Brissett to hold down the fort or something like that, that would be pretty disappointing to me.
I don't know if that's the wrong move though.
I'm not saying it's wrong.
Even
I just
if it's
think
disappointing, I don't know if it's the wrong move. I completely
Right.
understand what you're saying, But I just, in this case specifically, I kind of think you just have to keep your eye on the ball about what's important. And if you don't like any of those guys at 3, or you don't want to trade up in this year's draft, even if you do have more ammunition, it's going to be fascinating. Because I think there are other teams that are going to be incentivized to try to get to that pick at number 2 if the Giants are sitting there and don't want a quarterback, because they are also in a position where they kind of need one to get things started, which we'll talk about here as we move through them. The Tennessee Titans, the silver lining for the 2025 Titans. I don't think this one's going to be hard to figure out.
The quarterback is good, man. Like this is just like the quarterback, or I mean,
he's
good
at
is probably
least
strong.
Fun.
He's I'm pretty confident that he's going to be good. Like I really will stand on it. Like I think he's going to be good. Obviously, he did a lot of bad stuff this year, but this is going to sound ridiculous because of what this quarterback has done this year. I feel like a similar level of confidence that this guy is going to be fine despite how bad his rookie year was statistically in some ways as like Drake May. Like Drake May's success rate was higher, and I do think he was a little bit more put together. But when I see some of the high-end stuff, I'm just like, I don't care how bad like some of these games were in some of these moments where like his best stuff is, you can't teach some of it, man. Like it's incredible. Like the velocity he gets, the arm angles he gets, he's a really good athlete. He's strong in the pocket. He's not afraid to go and make plays. Like I think that he's going to be really good.
Even if there are doubts about the overall like consistency and quality beyond like whatever the excitement or the flashes are, that's not what this exercise is about. Like he has shown more than enough for him to be a silver lining for the Titans season. And the fact that they've had some of their best moments down the stretch here, I think is something that you can easily get excited about. And overall, we've talked about this. We talked about it after the Niners game. Like, I think that the development and the progress from the offensive line as a group as the season has gone along is also something that you can root some optimism in if you're a Titans fan. And that group, for the most part, is going to be coming back. Zite was obviously a free agent. He was on a 1-year deal. But Dan Moore, it was a really rough start to the season, and I think it's been a lot of ups and downs, but he should be a capable left tackle in a slightly better situation. Skoronski's really come on. Like, he's somebody to get really excited about. Cushenberry's going to be a year further removed from that Achilles next year. He's still under contract, and you hope, just cross your fingers, that Latham can stay a little bit healthier. And that group, even if they're never going to be what the best version of it could have been before this season, I still think there's enough there where, like you said with the Jets, like if the offensive line talent is there, that can accelerate a quicker turnaround than people might think. And then you have the quarterback. We'll see what happens with the pass catchers. This team has $106 million in cap space going into next year. If Alec Pierce hits free agency, this is by far my favorite spot for him to land. Like, by far.
Love that. I absolutely adore that fit. Like, all of the things that Alec Pierce is good at are exactly the type of shit that Cam Ward needs at his number 1 receiver spot. Big guy, go catch the ball. Like, that's what we need.
You go get a guy, I mean, we'll see. He may not even hit free agency. That's if he doesn't, by the way. If he doesn't end up hitting free agency, we're in a spot, and we'll talk about it with a couple of these teams. We did it yesterday. Which team we were talking about the defensive free agents? The Bengals, where I listed off the names for you that, like, to me, like the most exciting names for the Bengals in free agency, and like none of them are actually exciting. That is true for all of these bad teams that are going to have a lot of cap space as well. And if the fact that Alec Pierce, which I think has made incredible strides this year, like is one of the most improved players in the NFL, in my opinion, from last year to this year. It looks so good. So I'm not trying to diminish Alec Pierce, but the idea that Alec Pierce is the prize of free agency, and if he doesn't hit the market, we're looking at a disastrous sort of free agent class, tells you all you need to know about the overall quality of this group of free agents.
Which, like, I feel like we almost in a way said that last year about, like, Milton Williams, where it was like, he's the third guy on the Eagles line, and if he doesn't really hit free agency, there's going to be a problem. And the fact that he's the belle of the ball is kind of funny. Alec Pierce is kind of, like, in that range of player. And so, yeah, again, if he gets ripped off the market, I don't know, man.
Looking at the other side of the ball, this team is going to have his pick in the top 5. They don't need to draft a quarterback. There are a couple edges based on how I understand this draft that are going to be available. That is the position that I think you just pull the trigger. Like, this 100%. Team needs edge help so desperately bad. And so if they can find a difference-making edge player in the top 5, if they can go get a receiver in free agency, if the offensive line can be a little bit better and a little bit healthier removed from some of those injuries, and then also just with a different offensive ecosystem next year. I don't know. I can get there. I can get there where I'm like looking forward to what the 2026 Titans could look like.
Which is funny because we had some like kind of tepid excitement about the Titans coming into this year, and it mostly like fell apart. But like I'm sometimes I'm willing to do it again. Sometimes I'm willing to do it again.
I think it's mostly when you have a foundation of talent and this is all going to be dependent on what the offensive coaching staff looks like next year. That's what it's all going to be. Like when we're looking at these teams who have these remarkable turnarounds from season to season, that's typically what we're looking at. Think about all the teams that are just significantly better this year than they were last year that have taken these massive leaps from like last place to first place. The Bears have Ben Johnson. The Jaguars have Liam Cohen. The Patriots have potentially the MVP at quarterback, but getting the play caller right in New England has been a huge part of their success. And so finding the right offensive ecosystem is the way that you can kind of pour a little bit of gasoline on whatever small little flicker currently exists with the pool of talent on the Titans offense. So I don't think it's crazy to think that with the right atmosphere, we can get a version of the Titans next year that is a lot better than the version of the Titans we saw this year. Let's keep moving down here. The Arizona Cardinals, currently slated to pick 5th in this draft. What is your silver lining about the 2025
This one was also pretty difficult.
It's hard.
For me, the Jets one, like I said, was a little bit of health. I think this one was a little bit harder for me to find because even like the Jets roster is bad, but at least like the offensive line, I look at it and I'm certain that it's good. The Cardinals, for me, I came down to like I think the secondary. You have at least some stuff to be excited about. Like, I think Will Johnson has played really well for a rookie. Denzel Burke, as a 5th-round rookie, I think has played better than you would expect for a guy of that caliber. Garrett Williams, when he's healthy, is good. And Budda Baker is one of the best safeties in the league when he's got some stuff. And so I know they could lose Jalen Thompson in free agency this offseason. But, like, I do think the secondary is good and would look a lot better if they weren't consistently failed by the front that is pass rushing in front of them.
I think you could make a similar argument for the pass catchers on offense. Like, I think there's like a decent amount of pass catching talent on this team. I think that's dependent on what happens with Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know what to think of that at this point. I think writing him off after these 2 years when he's been a little bit banged up this year and you've seen some flashes from him this season would be wrong. But even if we get a version of Marvin Harrison Jr. who's like a B+ version of the one that we thought he could be, Michael Wilson has looked excellent down the stretch, like truly excellent. And you already have Trey McBride. And so the fact that those 3 guys are going to be in your pass catching room next year, that is a much better situation than we typically get with some of these rebuilding teams or teams picking in the top 5 of the draft. So I do think there's enough there for a little bit of hope and optimism. You have a left tackle that you feel good about, even though he's hurt to end this season the same way he was hurt a little bit last year. But I think Paris Johnson is still like a building block piece. This team specifically, I think, needs like a full-scale reset to the offensive line over the course of this offseason. Like, they need to finally say, all right, this is the year. And we'll see. We'll see who's making this decision, whether it's Monty Austin-Ford or some other person in charge of the personnel department. But I think this is the team that, I keep bringing up the Bears, but it's in front of mind for me, that needs the sort of, we need 2 to 3 new starters among this group, the same way that a team like Chicago did this offseason. And so you're picking in the top 5. I think there are a couple different directions you could go. Are you the team that trades up for a quarterback, which we can talk about here in a second? Or do you try to grab like an offensive tackle early in this draft and then use some of the free agent money, which you're going to have a decent amount of financial flexibility, especially if you move on from Kyler, to try to bring in 1 or 2 pieces if you want to. So these are guys that, again, they're 3rd contract players. They're not exactly the types of guys you want to sign in free agency, but we know that the tail, in terms of the age curve at offensive line, is typically a little bit better than other positions. A David Edwards, a Braden Smith, a Connor McGovern, just playable, workable pieces up front to go along with 1 draft pick in your young left tackle. With the pass catching pieces you have, if you can bring in like a capable quarterback and you have an offensive coaching staff that you feel good about, if this group gets fired, I can get there. Like I can get there.
They've got to fix the offensive. That's really what it is to me, because I think we both kind of talked about it coming in, like them taking the approach this year where it was like, we're just going to hope that a couple of our young guys take a step and that some of our like replacement level pieces are fine even without Clayton Adams being a part of the run game, it's like they're going to make that bet. It made sense in the moment, even if we could see what the downside was. Well, you've seen the downside now. So you've got to go make some replacements, and like they're probably not going to be able to do it with the quality of guys that like the Bears did, or even maybe to the extent like the guys that the Vikings did, where they go out and get guys like Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, and then spend another first round pick on a left guard and stuff like that. Like even that might be a little bit difficult to do, but most of their interior probably has to go. I think you could maybe even make a change at right tackle if they wanted to. Like I would say
I think you have to. Jonah Williams is a free agent, and Kelvin Beachum is playing over there right now.
Yeah, I didn't remember whether Jonah Williams was a free agent or not, but
it was a 2-year deal, I think.
That makes sense. So yeah, like everybody but Paris Johnson, I think you could make a case that like they could be up for it, and so I would say you got to replace at least 2 of those guys. But if they're the right guys, like I could get around to that. And the quarterback thing is tricky because on one hand, if they want a young one, they are going to have to trade up, right? But they're going to get something back for Kyler, you would imagine. And so if that can kind of come out in the wash a little bit, maybe it doesn't really feel so bad to trade up for a quarterback.
I don't think it ever feels bad to trade up for a quarterback within reason. If you're going from 5 to 2, if that guy's good, you'll never think about that again. Who gives a shit? And I think this is the team, again, depending on what happens with the offensive line, where, and I know that's a huge question mark, but we don't typically have teams with like this level of pass catching talent for a young quarterback to come in with. And this is all going to be dependent on, again, what the offensive ecosystem is for whoever the staff is. But if you can kind of try to remake the offensive line this offseason with those pass catchers and have a young quarterback, I think that there's something here. Like, I do think that this has a chance to be a more hospitable environment for a rookie quarterback than it might seem if they're in a position to get one of those guys.
Really, do you think them versus the Jets and how they manage this is going to be interesting? Because they're inverse of each other. Like the Cardinals have all of the non-offensive line pieces. They do not have the offensive line whatsoever. The Jets have all of the offensive line pieces, nothing outside of a injured Garrett Wilson basically coming out. And Mason Taylor's okay, but like it's just a different situation.
It's an interesting question because I actually think this speaks to one area where we talked about the free agent class. Free agent classes are getting worse and the cap is exploding. And so you're going to have a lot of these teams with a bunch of free agent money to throw around, but there aren't going to be a lot of players worth spending on in free agency. The offensive line, there are 2 different considerations. You can trade for guys, which we've seen teams do over the last couple of years, but even with like the diminished quality of the classes overall, I still think it's going to be easier to find offensive linemen than it is going to be to find receivers. Like the receiver free agent classes every single year just getting worse and worse and worse. And because you don't want to be signing, I think McGovern, David Andrews, Braden Smith, all those guys, they're going to be like 28, 29 years old. You don't want to be signing 28 or 29-year-old receivers in free agency.
Right.
You can be signing 28 or 29-year-old offensive linemen in free agency and potentially get some bang for your buck there. So the fact that both of these teams are going to have a lot of money to throw around, but one needs pass catchers and one needs offensive linemen, I actually think you're in a better situation if you need the offensive linemen, if you have a little bit of financial wiggle room.
That is a good point in terms of like quickly patchworking it together this year. Like I actually think that's a good. I think that's a good thought, actually.
Next one here, the Cleveland Browns. What is your silver lining for the 2025 Cleveland Browns?
I kind of have 2. I feel weirdly more optimistic about this team than I probably should, but their rookie class is the first one. Their rookie class is awesome, dude.
That's it.
Harold Fannin is as good as you could hope for a rookie tight end. Quinshot Judkins has been really good for them. Carson Schlesinger, like, still might be my defensive rookie of the year. And then even guys like, I think Mason Graham has been a little bit disappointing for what you wanted him to be for a top 5 pick. Still a solid player. Dylan Sampson has been like a decent rotational back for them. Like, they hit about as well as you could with this draft class. And then the second thing that I would say that I think is a little bit of a silver lining, I don't know if they're going to keep Kevin Stefanski and this coaching group, but this team was still playing hard and doing really interesting stuff offensively down the stretch. And I think that the defense has still been called pretty well. And so this, to me, like, still is a good staff. I would totally understand if they want to move on, but the fact that the staff still had life to me at the end of the year, like, that is a little bit of a silver lining.
Rookie class is the first place you have to start. And that's really what they were rooting a lot of their hopes in coming into the season. It's like, if our rookie class hits, this is going to be a success in some way, just no matter what happens in the win-loss column. And that's exactly what has happened. Like, this is a team that had no picks over the last 3 years because of what happened with the Watson trade. And so the fact that there's a real chance you found like 4 to 5 guys who are going to be multi-year starters for you out of this class all the way into the 3rd round. That's what they needed, and that's what they got. Mason Graham might not be a superstar, but he is a solid player. He's going to be there for a while. Schlesinger looks great. Judkins, the injury with Judkins is a bummer. A lot of these teams, even the Cardinals, like I was going to mention some of the defensive pieces for the Cardinals. The fact that Garrett Williams and Walter Nolan are now in a place where their statuses for 2026 are in question because of those injuries, like that's just a brutal thing to face. And now Judkins has an awful lower body injury to end the season. He's going to be working through that. But even keeping that in mind, I still think that what you've gotten from this rookie group, there's a lot to like with that. And think that's what this season was about for the Browns. And now you're in a spot where you have 2 more first-round picks and you've got 10 picks overall, including 8 in the first 5 rounds. Like that's just not what this team has been working with in the past. And so you now have even more opportunities to try to restock the cupboard with young talent after really not having any of that over the last couple of years. The problem is the rest of the roster outside of that rookie class is like a complete mystery at this point.
Yeah. Like the offensive line, we said coming into the year that like all of their offensive linemen are old and also up for free agency. Don't feel good about that situation there. And then even the pass catching stuff, like Judy's fine and Tillman is fine, but those guys need to be bumped down like 2 spots on the pass catching totem pole, probably.
There are just so many areas that they need to address. The defense, I think there is a foundation there with you have Schlesinger in the middle.
If they weren't being griefed by the offense consistently, like I think the defense would be like a top 7-8 unit.
It's
if not
still
better.
Really good.
Like it still kind of is, yeah.
And even something like the Tyson Campbell trade, like the quiet part of the Campbell-Newsome trade is that Newsome was going to be a free agent and Campbell had gotten that extension already. So you've got Campbell under contract for multiple years. You still have Denzel Ward, obviously. Delpit, I think, has had a really nice season for them on the back end. You have Schlesinger in the middle. The defensive line is essentially all intact. And because they gave Alex Wright that extension now. And so now you have Miles, Mason Graham, Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, I think still has a couple years left on his rookie contract, at least one. And then Malik Collins, he signed a 2-year deal this offseason, so he's going to be back next year too. And so the defense is still going to be pretty darn set up next year. The problem is, and this is, I think, the exact point that a lot of people made with the not trading Myles Garrett when you did. How long is the defense going to be this? And is it going to be this long enough for the offense to potentially catch up to it? And I think now you're getting to a point where that might be difficult. Like it's probably going to take until 2027 for you to realistically have added enough talent on offense to be competitive. And by then, what is the defense going to look like? And so it just seems like the different timelines for both sides of the ball are what ultimately could sabotage what is a very talented defense in Cleveland.
That does feel tricky. I think especially for like the back end, right? Because I think like back end, like once guys get up to like 27, 28, you kind of just never know when it's going to go. Whereas at least with the front, it's like Mason Graham's young. Garrett feels like he has the play style that could play until he's like 38 and he'll still be extremely productive. Alex Wright is a young player. Carson Schlesinger is like, I think going to be an incredible linebacker in this league for a long time. So at least like the front 7 has like some youth and sustainability to it. With the back end, who knows? Especially if Jim Schwartz stays as the DC, right? Where it's like, we're playing man coverage, buddy. You better be able to run. And so if suddenly
put a lot of
those
mileage
guys
on
can't,
those legs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. If suddenly those guys can't run, they're going to have a little bit of an issue.
I have no idea what happens with the offense this offseason. You need a new offensive line. Like, just a whole new one.
Yeah.
You need a whole new one. In theory, you could bring some of those guys back. Like, I'm sure they'll have a conversation with Batonio and you know all those other guys that are hitting free agency, but you desperately need to add some pieces to that group, even if you're bringing a couple of those guys back. And so do you do that early in the draft? And if you do that early in the draft, what do you do at quarterback? Because like the Jets, I think with the Jets, it's very easy if you're a Moogie to just say, we're punting on it this year. I understand that's going to be difficult for the coaching staff, but we have a plan here. We're punting on it again. If you're the Browns, are you going to put Stefanski in that position again after he has been there for so long, where you're just going to make this group ride it out with Shedeur for next year? I do think similar to the Jets situation, that might not be the worst move if you're trying to like optimize the team building process over the next 2 years. But do you feel good about that? If they bring this staff back and it's just like, we're just going to ride it again with Shedeur into next year. Like, I think that's kind of a tough sell.
I think that's a really tough sell for me. Like, I would get it in terms of like trying to keep the like how this thing is going to function and not over leveraging ourselves for making a new move. But like, I just don't know if we saw enough from Shedeur Sanders to be like, that's the young quarterback like we should give another season to. And then
without any other additional competition,
right? Without
like real competition.
Yes. If they want to have it him and Malik Willis, or they can trade like nothing for one of these other veterans, that's totally fine. I just think that you can't move into next year with only him as your option. I think that would be a little bit tough for Kevin Stefanski.
I'm really interested in how much urgency they have this offseason specifically to find the quarterback or to take like a real dice roll at quarterback, not Dylan Gabriel with a 97th pick. At the very least, like, do you do something where you roll the dice on like a Tyler Shuck type in the second round if a guy like that exists this year? I think there's probably part of them, and Judkins is going to be a good player. I think there's probably part of them that has some regrets about not taking more of a real dice roll on Shuck earlier in the process. Because if they had done that, it changes a lot of the discussion.
And because actually what I was also about to say, Tyler Shuck kind of fits what they want to be as an offense, like what Kevin Stefanski has been good at. Like, you could run what the Jacoby Brissett offense was a few years ago with a guy like Tyler Shuck, whereas if
he's just super Jacoby Brissett.
Yes, literally. Yeah. And like, honestly, if I look at some of the quarterbacks that the other veterans that might be on the market, Kyler Murray is not that guy. Clearly, like, the reason the Cardinals play Jacoby Brissett is because he's different from Kyler Murray. I don't think Tua Tagovailoa really fits into that category. I don't even really like Mac Jones, kind of, but you're not going to get a lot of the downfield stuff that I think Stefanski does ideally want to do, even with a guy like Mac Jones. Like, a lot of your other vet options don't really fit into what is, in my mind, like the ideal Kevin Stefanski offense. And so maybe if they think there is a quarterback in the second round that like does fit a little bit more into that mold, that could be nice for them. I do think some of the stuff Malik Willis has been doing in Green Bay does actually fit what they like, though.
Disagree with that. I just wonder, if you're this team specifically, are you in a spot where you just want to be reshuffling the deck chairs at that position again? Or you want something that feels a little bit more substantial than that? And if you do make a decision like that, are you only doing it to make yourself feel better? Is it the actual right decision? Like, I think that's what they're going to have to sort through this offseason when they ultimately make that choice. And again, maybe it's a different coaching staff that's going to be there anyway, and they don't give a shit about having to have a bridge quarterback because they have a little bit more leash because it's year one of a new regime. So just so many questions that a lot of these teams are having to sort through. And I think the Browns arguably have as many as anybody, considering what the quarterback and offensive line situation is going to look like combined with the staff questions. The Washington Commanders, who could have fit into yesterday's show, honestly. Like, they're the only team that we could have put in either one of those, but they are picking in the top 8, and so it pretty cleanly fits into this. What is your silver lining for the 2025 Washington Commanders?
If Jaden Daniels can remain healthy, I mean, he is still a quarterback that I would be incredibly excited about. And then I think on top of that, like kind of pairing with that a little bit, I do think the offensive line has something. Like, I think the Tunsil trade was what you wanted it to be. I think even finding like Chris Paul at guard has been like, he's not the
best.
He's
a free agent, actually.
Really? Is he that old?
Yes.
Okay.
He's been there for a while.
I feel like they could still get him back for a decent, like, I don't feel like he would be a guy who commands that much in free agency. And so, at least for the sake of like consistency, I think I would want to probably bring him back if they can. And then you just hope that Connerly takes a step. And he's been a little bit better later in the season than he was. I think he had some really rough stretches early on, but I really, really liked him coming out at the draft. And so I think between those two factors, there's still enough reason for optimism here if Daniels can stay healthy. But we talked about earlier, that's not necessarily a given.
You're a year removed from the Cosme injury. He came into the season banged up, obviously, so you'd hope that you're going to get a better version of him next year. Tunsil's been incredible this season, and so that group, still a lot to like moving into next year. I'm with you, though. I mean, like, yeah, the Jaden Daniels injury thing obviously is a concern, but last year happened. Like, that was real. Like, that whatever happened this year doesn't erase what we got from Jaden Daniels this year, even if I think there are legitimate questions about his ability to stay healthy moving forward. But that is a quarterback that, if he's on your roster, you feel at least decent about what the future is going to look like, even if there are a lot of questions elsewhere. This season, is a disaster for Washington. Like, it's a disaster. Like, there's no ambiguity about that. But that was always possible when they did what they did. Like, bringing back this group of like aging veterans and just trying to take whatever you did last year and push it further over the finish line. This is always the downside case of that. They can pretty easily move on from that version of this build into like a more traditional timeline. The only thing that's preventing them from doing that is a lack of picks. Like, they traded away some of those picks, and so they have fewer resources in which to add young talent to the roster, but they still have a lot of flexibility in free agency if they want to use it. And they don't really have a lot of like bloated contracts as part of this. I mean, the only guys they really traded for, Debo they can move on from Debo after this year. I believe this is the final year of his contract, even if after they adjusted it. And then Tunsil is entering the final year of his deal next year. I assume he's going to get an extension, but even guys like Lattimore, you could move on from him this year. And so a lot of your big swings were not long-term financial commitments. They were just draft capital commitments. And so the pivot off of whatever the 2025 plan was for the Commanders is not that ugly of a pivot, even if you've left yourself with fewer bites at the apple draft-wise.
Yeah, I think it like makes. I think the bitter part of it is that, yeah, like you thought that you could get over the line this year and then you were completely terrible. But I do think that when you have the quarterback like this and you have enough pieces at the offensive line, like you can make a couple of decent picks, get one or two free agency signings and be back to where you need to be. And then obviously I think I assume the coaching staff will be different. Maybe it won't be, but I would have to assume with how bad the defense was that it should be.
It almost has to be. I mean,
Yeah.
You moved on from the defensive coordinator as the play caller halfway through the year. Like, how are you not going to make changes?
It's what you said with the Cowboys, which actually the Commanders apply to this. The Bengals were a historically bad defense for 2/3 of the season, and there was a stretch late November, early December where the Commanders were worse than that. Like that's pretty inexcusable when you have a head coach who's a defensive guy.
I think that is the biggest remaining question, where if you want to take the opposite side where there's less optimism about this team than we're framing it to be right now, is this the right coaching staff? Because after last year, when it was not is this the right coaching staff, what is the ceiling of this coaching staff specifically, I think becomes a worthwhile question after this year. Because last year, after the 2025 season, it was all sunshine and rainbows, and I can't wait to see where this all goes. It's all good all the time. Everybody's happy. After this year, you just can't be in that place. Defensively, something needs to change. And I don't want to be too harsh on what the offense was this year, considering the fact that they were dealing with quarterback injuries overall. But I still think there's a reasonable question to be asked about what the long-term ceiling is for a team that plays such a specific brand of offensive football in the way that Washington does.
So I actually feel now kind of about Cliff Kingsbury the way that I do about like Greg Roman, where it's a very specific style of offense. It can work in certain ways. When you hop into a new environment and like get a bunch of different players, like you can kind of get on people with 1 year, obviously Lamar Jackson 2019, or even earlier stretches with Greg Roman, like some of the Kaepernick stuff, or obviously what he did in Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor. You can have these little stretches where it looks hot when you have all the right guys. I do think once teams start to get a little bit more on you, it really does put just more onus on the execution of the quarterback to be unbelievable or the talent otherwise. And I just think Washington was in a spot where, I think teams were a little bit more ready for what Daniels was capable of this year. And then the pass catching talent just wasn't good enough. And when you're going to be this spread RPO, like empty team all of the time, you need to be able to just have more receiving talent than they did. And I think some of what they got away with just kind of fell apart this year.
That's why I want to give them a little bit of grace. Like, even outside of the Daniels thing, you have 9 games from Terry McLaurin. You don't have many pass catchers outside of Terry McLaurin other than Deebo Samuel, who's like a very specific type of player. This team, if we walk into next year with this same offensive line, a healthy Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Ayuk, and this coaching staff, let's just see how it goes. Like, I think I have similar questions that you do, but I do think they deserve another year with like an actual stable of players before we get overly alarmist about what the Cliff Kingsbury Commanders are going to look like in the long term.
That's where I'm at with it. I think I have some questions about like the consistency and the stability of some of this stuff, but I don't think it was so bad this year that like you have to fire Cliff Kingsbury and get somebody in there. Like he's of a decent quality enough coordinator that he's got some stuff that he can go to consistently, and you'll just see if they can find that ceiling again.
Our last team here, they're last because they're picking furthest down the draft of all of these teams, is the New Orleans Saints. And suddenly, on December 30th, we've gotten to a place where the New Orleans Saints might be the easiest team to have an answer for in this exercise. So, what is your silver lining for the 2025 New Orleans Saints?
I think it's a very broad answer, but I think the roster overall is just better than it seemed like it was going to be. Like I think the defense quietly has been like pretty damn good, especially over the second half of the season. And I think there's a lot of excitement with the young talent on this team, but a lot of the young talent is some guys on offense. It's like Kelvin Banks, it's Tyler Shuck, obviously, and then you've got a couple of the guys on defense, but really the only one that's played a lot of the season is Jonas Sanker at safety. And I think that he's played really well. But a lot of the defense is like, I think it's actually been called well by Brandon Staley. The front is playing well. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, even though he has some tough games, I think has had generally a decent season. Alontae Taylor's been good at the nickel for them. Like them getting proof of concept on that side of the ball. And then Tyler Shuck having some pretty good signs of life, especially over the last month. That's enough to be excited about where I think this thing could be going.
I'm with you. And I think a lot of it to me is the quarterback and the way that the quarterback is playing. I really like watching him play. I really like the way he plays the position. We talked about it after the Panthers game, but I like the rhythm he plays within the pocket. The physical tools are pretty clear. Like when you watch his ability to drive the ball, he has a really nice arm. The movement is just better than I expected it to be with like a player of his archetype. He's able to extend a little bit more. He's able to scramble in selective situations. I mean, there are like 4 or 5 plays he made in the Titans game where I'm sitting there being like, okay, like I can work with this. He throws a deep out to Pettis in the third quarter of that game that like made me sit up straight in my chair. And then even the touchdown he had to Kevin Austin, who, by the way, Kevin Austin is number 81 catching passes from him in this game because all the other pass catchers other than Olave and the tight ends are hurt. And then he threw a pass, like it was kind of the dagger in the fourth quarter. And it was similar to me to a lot of the throws he had in that Panthers game where he starts left, comes all the way backside to Juwan Johnson and just fires like a backside inbreaker to Juwan Johnson on a huge third down. I don't know, man. Like I'm pretty excited about what he can be within this offense. And even with so many guys hurt right now offensively, you have 2 of your preferred starting offensive linemen, given like the current state of that group last week against the Titans. You have Olave and no other receivers. All of your running backs are hurt. And I still, when I'm watching the offense, I'm like, oh, I like this. Like, I think there's a lot for them to build on, not only with the quarterback and some of the talent, but just what they're trying to be and what they're trying to do on offense. I think there's a lot to like with that. And like you said, with the defense, I think there's enough there on defense. You have some of the younger draft picks and even like Chase Young. Chase Young is 26.
Still a good player. Yeah.
He's 26 years old. And he had a really nice season. And so I think that there is a lot to build on with where the Saints are right now. And you're picking in the top 10. You're probably not picking a quarterback based on how your guy has been. So you can go a different direction there. And they're still paying the taxes and the bills for all of the cap shit next year. Like they're still $11 million over the cap. I assume they're not going to want to do too much stuff in terms of trying to get under it, so they're not borrowing from the 2027 cap. But by 2027, you're clear. Like all of the other things that you did over the last however long, those sins have been paid for by the time you get to 2027. And so I think like the 2-year outlook for this team is just dramatically more clear sky than I anticipated it being by the end of this season.
It is. Like, the floor for this team was ended up being a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. And I don't necessarily think that either Kellen Moore or Brandon Staley have done anything this offseason or this season from like a coaching perspective where I'm like, oh my God, schematically, they're just kicking ass. But I watch them and I'm just like, they're put together every week and guys know what they're doing and they're executing well. And then kind of like you were saying, like Tyler Shuck, I don't think is maybe like quite as exciting as like a Cam Ward or whatever, but he is very put together. Like he just feels like he's playing adult quarterback and is not really overwhelmed by having to command the offense. Like I think Jackson Dart, like on a play to play, like Jackson Dart does more exciting things within like one individual play. Like I do think he's a better athlete. He'll get to some just crazier throws outside of the pocket and stuff. But I think the command of the offense down to down can be a little bit tougher for Jackson Dart. With Tyler Shuck, I don't really feel that. Like I think maybe the accuracy you would want to get honed in a little bit, but like I still think that generally he's got some pretty high floor stuff there.
Almost think that some of the ways in which he's boring are good for a
Yeah.
young quarterback. Like I think that the fact that it does look as settled as it does, even if it's not quite as exciting as some of those other young guys, the dips aren't quite as low. He still takes some bad sacks. Like that,
Yeah.
if we're trying to think about where he needs to improve, even in that Titans
Which is
game,
the Ryan Tannehill thing. Like Ryan Tannehill took some bad
that's
ones.
something that as you get a little bit older and as you get a better feel for when the ball needs to come out, why it needs to come out. And with him, I think part of the problem with him, and it's not necessarily a problem, it's just that because he's a good enough athlete to be a scrambler and to create a little bit, he's hanging on to the ball more often in some of these scenarios because he doesn't need to get it out immediately for it to be a positive play. And so I think that's something that you can get a better sense of as you spend more time in the league and as you get more reps. But the fact that he is a good enough athlete to have some of those creation moments that lead to the sacks, I think ultimately can be more of a positive than it is a negative.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited to see how they kind of retool the offense around him and what they think it's supposed to be. And I think that'll be fun.
All right. That is all we've got. At least something to be excited about for all 8 teams picking at the top of the draft. This will be coming your guys' way on Thursday this week. We've got a full slate of shows. Building the Beast should be in your feed right now. Obviously, a lot to talk about with the playoff games that are happening later in the week. As we did today, we're starting to get into draft talk because the top of the draft is starting to crystallize a little bit. So if you are not listening to Building the Beast with Dane and Dave, now is absolutely the time to start getting into those shows and start checking them out because they are more relevant now than they've been all year. And then tomorrow we are going to have our week 18 preview, only hitting like a handful of games, but then we're also going to talk about some of the milestones the players could be hitting this week, and then all of the different seeding situations that we're going to be looking at depending on how those games go. So multiple shows still coming your guys' way this week, and then we will be back with our Week 18 recap on Sunday night. For now, that's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.